Hello, everyone. My name is Paul. Welcome back to the new news. I hope that everyone's having a fantastic day. I hope that you, your family, and your friends are safe. And if not, I do hope that you find that safety and security in the very near future. There's been a ton of stuff that has happened over the last 72 hours and a lot of big developments here at TNN. So I'm happy to announce that we have some really good stuff going on. So First off, of course, when we're talking about the news, the point of this program is because there is a lot of people throughout the world that have a lot of really bad things happening to them. The whole point of this news channel started to try and help people, hence why we are the news that gives back. And that is a pledge that we have made from day one, and that's a pledge that we continue to strive for as we continue to work towards becoming an actual nonprofit organization. And as you've seen throughout the work that we've continued to do here for almost a year now, which has been pretty amazing to spend the last year doing this. It's been a lot of very long, hard hours. I will say that. And I appreciate all the support that you guys have given us to make this happen, to keep this happening. And it's been amazing. And so a lot of people are in need. Roughly every 4 seconds, someone dies of hunger throughout the world. One child every single minute goes into a state of severe life-threatening malnutrition, and these are factors coming from the United Nations and their estimates. In fact, 345 million people globally need help and aid in some way, shape, or form. There's a horrific war ongoing inside of Ukraine that has been ravaging the nation for over a year now. There are conflicts all over the world where people need immense amount of medical care and support. And so we continue to do that. And in the video description below, as we have always done, there are a ton of different organizations down there, which 70% or more of the donations that they receive go directly to their programs. They go directly to helping people, and they go directly to, making sure these people get what they need and the help that they need, with 30% or less going to things like salaries and administration's costs. We have added one more tonight. This is something that we've been working on and we have talked about for a very long time, and it's one that we have now finally have decided to go ahead and start. And that new one is our very first initiative here as the new news, as TNN. This initiative is called Operation Guardian Support. And the point of this is to provide medical supplies and non-lethal aid to Ukrainian forces and medical staff and personnel throughout the country of Ukraine in order to support them with their ongoing endeavors to save lives and to continue to fight back against the Russians during this very horrific war. We understand that there are a lot of organizations that are also doing these things, but as an organization that wants to become a nonprofit, as an organization that wants to help, we have finally decided that, given recent controversies and recent issues that have kind of rocked the nonprofit and the NGO organizations, we kind of want to bring some good back into that. And being very transparent, as we've already been. We haven't even had initiatives, and we still release all of our financials on our website. And so we are going to be actually going through. We actually do have a page up already. It is active here. It's called Operation Guardian Support, Dependable and Transparent is what we're going with. And that's because we are planning on being dependable with making sure everything gets to it. It's very heavily tracked, everything that we're planning on doing. And transparent to the point that we haven't even done anything. And you can see here we already have our first, it's blank, completely blank. It covers from March 1st all the way up through today of all the financial statements. We've actually gone through and gotten an entire new system for this. There's an entire setup for it. You can go ahead and donate to it if you'd like. Or, once again, you can always continue donating to what you have been. United 24, I always highly recommend United 24 because it's the Ukrainian government, UNICEF, all of those wonderful organizations down below are all been vetted to continue this. But we are proud to announce the fact that we have our very first initiative, and we will continue to work on this initiative, and hopefully we'll make a lot of amazing things happen. This is the news that gives back part becoming a reality. And it's thanks to you guys. And it's thanks to your support. It's thanks to everything that you guys have continued to do here with the channel, to help us here as an organization. And it's been an amazing growth. And we can't wait to see how far that goes into the future. So thank you very much, everybody. I really do appreciate all the stuff you guys have done and all the support we have been given. And if you can't give a lot to these organizations, whether it be ours or somebody else's, then give a little. And if you can't give anything at all, help us raise our awareness and raise our impact by giving us those likes and subscribes and sharing our stuff amongst your friends and communities, because the more people that come here and watch this, ultimately the more people that come here and are able to do good amount of stuff in the world, to become informed, they are able to donate, they are able to continue spreading this information, encouraging others, and trying to be a good change of pace for this world. And that is the whole point of the channel. That is the whole point of the project. And that's what we intend to do come hell or high water, is to put a little bit of good back into a rather dismal world. And with that, we end the lovely string of announcements. Oh, no, there's one more announcement. There will be a new co-host as well. We have taken in yet another new co-host. As you may know, our pets here are the co-hosts. We do have a new co-host who is sitting in quarantine right now because finally a boy in the group, is not currently allowed to be around the other animals. So he's adorable. He's very loving, and we have named him properly. And for those that are curious, the name is Javelin, of course. So, yes. Yes. And yes, Riley did choose the name, knowing that I would love it, of course. But yes, we will have a new co-host. Javelin will be joining us here in a couple of weeks, once he's out of quarantine, once he gets all of his shots and everything he needs. So, but yes, he is adorable. Yes, we have a new cat. His name is Javelin, and he is an adorable little cat. A very sweet boy. Very, very sweet boy. And so that is the last of the announcements there. But for those that are, coming here and trying to figure out what's going on, there is obviously a lot that's happening throughout the news. Has been happening over the last 48 hours or 72 hours. I apologize. And if you have any questions, please feel free and jump in and ask questions in the live chat. I am watching it, as I am every single night. And give you a little bit of a background on myself if you happen to be new here. So I served in the Marine Corps between 2016 and 2020. I served as an 0352 anti-tank missileman and a corporal with 2nd Battalion, 7th Marines. I did 2 tours in the Middle East. My first tour was between October of 2017 through March of 2018. I did about a month and a half at the beginning of deployment, sitting there in Kuwait, before redeploying over into Syria, where I spent roughly 4.5 months as part of Operation Inherent Resolve, where I assisted with Special Operations Forces fighting the Islamic State, as well as stabilizations and deterrence efforts there in northeastern provinces of Deir ez-Zor and Al-Hasaka. After that, I came back to the United States. I ran an armory for about 2-ish years, and then I redeployed back to the Middle East between October of 2019 and March of 2020, where I was the Javelin anti-tank. I was the Javelin team leader for the crisis response company out of Kuwait, where I spent the majority of my time. After that, I went to the Baghdad Embassy complex on New Year's of 2020 as one of the 100 Marines that responded to the compound to resecure the U.S. Embassy. I oversaw all anti-armor operations there as the leading team, or as the team leader of the team there, before going down to Saudi Arabia, where I trained Saudi Arabian Marines preparing to deploy as part of the coalition to Yemen. I'm a subject matter expert in anti-armor warfare and armored doctrine. I'm also a fully cross-trained rifleman, a fully cross-trained machine gunner, a partially cross-trained radio operator, as well as a CLS certified Marine, meaning I've received additional medical training on top of what most Marines are going to receive. And I do have real-world experience providing aid to real casualties. I also am, of course, a small unit leader, and I do have training in that field as well on small unit leadership tactics. Outside of that, I do have interest in other things. In the civilian world, I am a logistical coordinator, but I do have interest in things such as history, science, human geography. I do actually have taken several college courses in some of these things as well, but I am not an expert by far in many of them. So I will try to answer your questions with what knowledge I do have. But as always, expert or not, I always please implore you as a viewer to please do your own research. There's absolutely no alternative to doing your own research. If you would like to have a starting point, our maps are provided. If our link is actually in the video description below for our website, where you can find all of our maps, including this one, which is already up for tonight. And you can follow along with us, and you can go back through all of the maps, which we do have archived clear back to when we started the channel last year. And now, with all of that out of the way, we immediately dive into the news on what's happening throughout Ukraine. And it is quite a bit of stuff throughout the world and in Ukraine. And we actually start off over here. This is in Rivne, where we see a very beautiful mural. If you may remember, there was a very horrific execution of a Ukrainian POW. And very poignant video. It had a very major impact on Ukrainians and of course across the world. And so they have so this was painted by artist Konstantin Kashinovsky, who painted this on the walls of the local police department here in Rivne. Very beautiful work. So unfortunately, this does have copyright music, but you can hear them, or you can watch them here as they go through and as they paint this mural. A very beautiful mural, very well done. With that, we move on over here and into Kyiv, where we have quite a bit of news coming out for tonight. We got at least 4 stories here. The first one is the massive amounts of attacks on healthcare, and we've continued to see this throughout the entire duration of the war. The World Health Organization reports on this as they continue to go through and confirm, as well as the other UN organizations. And we see that, quote, since the beginning of Russia's full-scale war against Ukraine, Russian troops have destroyed or damaged at least 978 medical facilities in Ukraine and worth $2.5 billion. And that's coming from the Ministry of Health of Ukraine. Looking for it, says, what does the caption say? It is the text from the video, which, if you notice what he says in the video, he says his very last words on this earth is he took a drag off of his cigarette and he said, Slava Ukraini, and they immediately said, oh, you bitch, and then gunned him down. So in a shallow grave that they made him dig. So that it was the text of what was said. We have psychological problems amongst children, and this is coming from Volodymyr Zelensky himself, the president of Ukraine. He says, quote, due to Russia's war against Ukraine, about 1.5 million Ukrainian children have a risk of developing depression, anxiety, and other psychological problems. And this is something that the Elena Zelenska, is the first lady of Ukraine, this is what her foundation has been focusing on, is children with disabilities, children who have been injured as a result of the conflict, as well as children with psychological problems. Understanding that the massive effect, this war, regardless of how you look at it, is traumatizing to children, especially. As we've know with many other situations, children under the age of 5 especially are at risk with a lot of issues. That is no different when it comes to what has happened inside of Ukraine. But psychological problems include, these children were now living a peaceful life one day, and the very next day it was a war zone. And they had to flee, some of them without their parents, some of them alone, fleeing on foot in some cases to the border of Ukraine and going and into humanitarian care. Sometimes with their family, spending days at a time, some of them in hiding, some of them going through torture and occupation, some of them having been kidnapped, some of them having gone through sexual and gender-based violence incidents. and it's absolutely horrific. Many injured, many killed, many missing, many forcefully deported. The children of, regardless of how you look at these circumstances, have been psychologically affected in one significant way or another. Whether that was the trauma of having to flee the conflict and live abroad as a refugee, or whether that is, staying in the country and being witness as a young child to the absolute horrors of war. I mean, there's no good way to put that. It is what it is, exactly that. I mean, war is inexplicably horrific, and this one even doesn't do any kind. This, you could not do justice in description of this war. Even any words and any experiences I have from Syria or Iraq really fall completely short in every measure. But there is a little bit of good news, though. Strikers, Cougars, and Martyrs, oh my. British Challenger 2 tanks, German Martyr infantry fighting vehicles, American Striker APCs, and Cougar MRAPs were all transferred to Ukraine today. Once again, illustrating the amount, quality, and type of equipment Ukrainian forces are going to be provided in preparation for their upcoming counteroffensives. Additionally, it has been reported that 18 Leopard 2 tanks have so far been handed over to Ukrainian forces as well. And there is the lovely picture. They're handed over to the air assault brigades there. But we can see Cougar MRAPs. Those are actually pretty nice. I find them to be a little bit top heavy for my personal liking, but Cougar MRAPs are very good at their job. Very good. They're very effective. Strikers, of course, we all know how effective they are. The Challenger 2 main battle tank, considered one of the leading top-rated main battle tanks in the world. Very, very fearful. This is something that should have Russian tankers, shaking in their boots right now. The Challenger 2 and the Leopard 2s, especially the Leopard 2 A6 and 7 variants, are absolutely, they are scary to face. They're terrifying as an anti-tank missile perspective. They're terrifying opponents and their allies to us. And it's still terrifying at the thought of going up against them just because of how effective of a system that they are. Mortar infantry fighting vehicles, a little bit of an older system, but still very much a relevant one, and one that's going to be very effective. It's going to serve a much similar role to the Striker in its capacities there. So it'll be good to see how that goes. And of course, we're seeing, like gas Tigers and stuff that are rolling around there as well. So a lot of great things coming along here. Wonderful to see the air assault brigades getting their new toys to be able to really pack a punch when they head back out into the field. One that's actually geolocated to here inside of Kyiv. We have we have a story here regarding the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, which, if you may remember, there was a lot of scrutiny on the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, especially for its ties to the Russian Orthodox Church and some of the things that have been stated by them, and especially when it comes to them going through, and they were actually raided in many cases, with a lot of pretty incriminating things being found. The UOC was expelled from the historic monastery downtown Kyiv. The Ukrainian Orthodox Church has vacated the Kyiv Pechersk Lavra monastery yesterday, days before the March 29th deadline. The Ukrainian Orthodox Church has historic and proven ties to the Russian Orthodox Church, whose leader, Patriarch Kirill, has supported Russian President Vladimir Putin in the invasion of Ukraine, blessing the killing of Ukrainians. Since its creation in 1051, the Lavra has been a preeminent center of Eastern Orthodox Christianity in Eastern Europe. The UOC Metropolitan Bishop Pavlo, who is widely known as Pasha Mercedes for his love of expensive cars, became infamous for attacking journalists, called for unity with Russia, declared that Crimea was never Ukrainian, and called Ukraine the quote the aggressor in the war in Donbass. The UPC Church has an instrument of Moscow's has been an instrument of Moscow's colonial policy in Ukraine for centuries, and for which the majority of Ukrainians welcome the removal from the UNESCO World Heritage Site. Pasha Mercedes was already spotted trying to acquire a foreign passport. Some of the valuables also appear to have been taken by the USC priests. Apparently some of the valuables have been stolen. So, obviously, a very controversial thing ongoing there inside of Ukraine regarding the USC, and so we're going to leave it at that with the facts. As we jump over here and into the Donbass, what the kinetic amount, the kinetic power of the war is ongoing right now. This is where we're seeing the most activity. This is where we're seeing a lot of the fighting ongoing, obviously. And we start off with our latest daily Donetsk update, which comes from Pavel Kolenko, the head of the Donetsk Regional Military Administration. And he said, quote, on March 26th, number of victims of the Russian army in Donetsk Oblast increased by 1 killed and 2 injured. And we do get that from the graphic. He releases both in Ukrainian and in English every single morning. This one coming from this morning at 8 a.m. local time. And we can take a look at this graphic where so far one person was killed in Krasnohorivka, one was injured in Pivniche, and one injured in Bakhmut. Since the beginning of the invasion on the 24th of February 2022, 1,434 people have been killed, with an additional 3,264 having been injured. Keep in mind, this doesn't include areas such as, Volnovakha or the city of Donetsk itself, or even Mariupol, where, tens of thousands of people have been killed just based off of Maxar satellite footage alone. All of these locations, of course, falling under Russian occupation at this time. And until they are liberated, we will not know the actual death toll of the war. But unfortunately, that death toll did increase by at least one person and at least 25 additional injured after major amounts of shelling hit the city of Slavyansk. The artillery bombardment ended up striking administrations, buildings, offices, high-rise apartments, and private homes, and currently the rescue and recovery work is still ongoing. Coming from the office of Pavel Korolenko, once again, we have these photo sets. This is of firefighters and first responders there on the scene of the shelling, and quite a lot of widespread devastation. Furthermore, this right here is actually from an adjacent city of Druzhkivka. This is an orphanage that was struck by another shelling incident that was subsequently destroyed. I think it goes without saying that orphanages are not considered military targets by the laws of war. This right here is footage of the shelling there in Slavyansk. You can see, once again, more video footage. You can see, once again, just utter devastation as a result of the bombardment. To assist with these kinds of incidents, Ukraine Focus, a volunteer ambulance corps, is delivering 3 ambulances. I'm sorry for I've never been able to pronounce that word. To the 109th Donetsk Territorial Defense Brigade. Their goal is currently to deliver 1,000 ambulances to Ukraine. They do have the awesome photos there from their deliveries. Awesome to see more equipment going in to the region. A lot of great work. City of Kramatorsk was also hit by shelling on multiple occasions over the last 72 hours. However, it mostly centered around the industrial areas. Some residential homes and apartments, of course, were struck, but so far there have been no reports of civilian casualties. And you see some of the damage here coming from the city of Kramatorsk. This is from today's shelling, or sorry, yesterday's shelling. Additional shelling from the 25th. And very early in the morning on the 25th from overnight shelling once after Friday's stream. So it's a miracle that no one was injured or killed in that. Coming from the city of Bakhmut, Bakhmut does still hold. We can report that as of right now. We're still seeing a lot of activity, a lot of Ukrainian forces still fighting back. Fresh units have rotated in, of course, and they are continuing to reinforce that position. There is a media blackout, so information is still very, very small. There's very little information coming from the city of Bakhmut and the fighting ongoing there, as well as any movements, major movements of Ukrainian forces for, of course, operational security purposes. We can take a look here. Unfortunately, the repeated assaults into the city by the Russian forces and also the very brutal urban combat has led to very high casualties from both sides. This appears to be from the same tank, by the way. Yeah, whoever's getting the receiving end of that is having a very, very bad day. That is a very bad day. This one, unfortunately, doesn't have copyright music, but you can see just the amount of devastation in the city. I mean, you can see it there as well, but in that last few clips. But, I mean, the city is absolutely devastated. It's been under indiscriminate bombardment for months on end. We first reported on the Battle of Bakhmut on the 4th of June last year was the first time we reported on a battle around the Bakhmut vicinity proper. And we do know that there had been fighting in that general area even prior to that. Some overhead footage really giving you an idea of the devastation of Bakhmut and just the amount of destruction we're seeing here. So once again, we can see just the amount of destruction from around Bakhmut. Unfortunately, the amount of people that have been killed is astronomical.
Ну шо, пацаны, ебать, Бахмут, Сергуя, бля. Heavy metal, ебать. Ебать, там пидоры, вот тому, ебать. Да, дрончика немає, ебать. Опа, ебашат зі всіх сторін, суки. Опа. Бабахна.
In regards to the tank video, Bookham40 asked the question, so the rate of fire seems slow, just taking their time aiming. No, so yes, part of it comes down to actual gunnery, but for the most part, they're engaging a hardened position. So they're, for the most part, just staying pretty steady on target. It's just minor adjustments at that point. The T-64 is the first series of tanks that the Soviets built that were built with an autoloader. And this autoloaders for the Soviet Union, and then later, of course, the Russian Federation, their rate of fire is about 9 rounds a minute. So tanks don't fire. I mean, it's not an autocannon, right? It's not an autocannon. It's not like a 25 millimeter chain gun or something produced by Rheinmetall. It's a 125 millimeter smoothbore main gun that fires 9 rounds a minute, which for a tank is actually a pretty good fire rate. And unlike Western tanks that require a manual loader for many of them, the Challenger 2 and the Abrams specifically, the thing is that during sustained engagements, meaning, when you start going, 10, 15, sure, you can do 10, 15-minute bursts of firing. But when you're talking about 45 minutes, an hour, hour and 15, hour and a half, sustained engagements, that boy's arm's going to wear out. That's just how that goes. I mean, their arm, well, sure, adrenaline kind of keeps that going a little bit, but you can only go so long, and that even though that it may not be the fastest fire rate with an autoloader of tanks, it's a decent fire rate, and it can sustain that fire rate until it runs out of ammunition. And that's the key to it, is that for sustained engagements, tank on tank especially, they're going to be able to continue doing it. So they're going to be able to keep going, further and more consistently is the key there than a human loader will. Jumping over here to Zaporizhia, Zelensky met with Director General of the IAEA, Rafael Grossi, there, and they met at the Dnipro hydroelectric power plant in Zaporizhia to show him the recent damage that was committed to the dam as a result of recent strikes by the Russian forces on energy and critical infrastructure targets. The reason being is that this damage is actually affecting the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant, which is downstream here. Because that water is feeding, of course, the coolant is going to be part of that water level that cools the river, or cools the reactor. And also, that electric power plant is one of the last lines, if not the last line, of electricity connecting the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant to any grid. Bookham40 says a 4-man crew is better, no catastrophic kills by ammo. It's a trade-off. It is exactly what that is. It is a trade-off. In fact, for forces for a 4-man crew, you can also get a higher fire rate, but you can't sustain it. That's the point. That's the trade-off. And the reason for these tanks being the way that they are, Soviet tanks aren't inherently badly designed. It's just they were designed for a war meant to be fought in the 80s before you had anti-tank missiles that could travel far enough to actually, outrange the tank's main gun, before they were nearly as prevalent, and when the biggest threat to another tank, or to a tank, was yet another main battle tank. So, fighting on the flat eastern plains of Europe, the much smaller design of the T-series tanks makes a lot of sense. Large quantity, autoloader, uses less personnel, can field more tanks, and are very capable in tank-on-tank engagements. And for the time, their analog systems were just fine. Okay? But and their low profile made them more difficult to spot and more difficult to hit. So their small stature. I know it's hilarious to see a T-55 next to a Challenger 2, but it was purposely built like that because they were going to be smaller than what the NATO tanks were fielding. Because you have to think these were designed when the big war was between NATO and the Soviets on Eastern Europe. Makes a lot of sense, but the war that they're finding themselves in is not that. They're finding themselves fighting in supporting roles instead of leading armored spearheads. They're finding themselves in supporting roles in attrition, in a war of attrition against well-entrenched defensive forces instead of open flames maneuver tank-on-tank engagements. Anyway, going back to the main story, the story here, this is the meeting between Vladimir Zelensky and Director General Rafael Grossi.
How are you?
Well, good to
Yes. So that is really amazing. Okay, so this is the reconstruction.
This station aged of 92 years, and this is a facility to provide
which is a normal. But this time, of course, everybody will talk. I think that they are doing their separation and, of course,
What what's going on now?
yeah.
What's your role in this energy war? What's going on now?
Yeah. War started, which is all as long as it takes us all the offer.
So obviously, a good meeting there, and obviously a very important one between the two leaders. Over here to Kherson, 7 deported children returned to Kherson. Kherson Regional Military Administration reported that 7 Ukrainian kids who were forcibly deported to Crimea by Russian troops have been reunited with their families. The kids were sent to a rehabilitation camp inside of Crimea. You can see them here coming back. So pretty awesome to see. We've seen such horrific amounts of forced deportation, which, according to the 1993 Rome Statute and the 1949 Geneva Conventions, is a crime of genocide. And so to see at least some kids being able to return home at this point has been pretty amazing to see. We finished off our section here inside of the country of Ukraine with over here in the Odessa area, where we have an update from the Grain from Ukraine initiative that was launched by the Ukrainian government. Quote, on March 26, Ukraine sent the sixth ship with 30,000 tons of humanitarian wheat for Yemen within the Grain from Ukraine initiative. The bulk carrier Negmar Sisek left the Ukrainian port of Chernomorsk and joined the caravan with 3 more ships coming from the Ministry of Infrastructure of Ukraine. Now, that is everything that is happening inside of the country of Ukraine, but that's not everything to deal with it, though, when it comes to the news. As we get ready to move here and into the international segment, we move immediately right across the Sea of Azov to Krasnodar area here inside of Russia. And that's because we can see that the Wagner cemetery continues to expand. This, quote, this cemetery is huge. Men of all ages in these fresh graves. The creation of the Wagner cemetery became known at the end of the December of this year, or of this previous year, when the PMC Wagner founder Yevgeny Prigozhin spoke about 93 fresh graves there.
Вы пришли на кладбище, где похоронили всех вагнеровцев в горячем ключе. Очень большое кладбище, свежие все могилы, нет конца и края. И молодые все, и всех возрастов. Царство небесное. Не перейти их. Ой, вот вы пришли.
And that's not even close to most of their losses. That is not even close to most of their losses. To really illustrate just how many people are being killed out of the Wagner group. Most of their bodies aren't recovered. You have to think of Bakhmut, Soledar, this area, this 23-mile sector of the front line, pretty much like Flanders of World War I, where it is a muddy cesspool of trenches and death with no man's land between, and it has been fought over with wave attacks over and over and over again, brutal trench warfare fighting that has left piles of dead. There are so many. I saw a video today that was pretty disturbing to see in the 21st century. You know, I've seen it, I've seen, photos and heard stories about this before, from, World War I and even World War II, especially during the Okinawa campaign. But digging trenches, and as you're digging trenches, happening upon bodies that had been buried because they were sitting out there, and so much artillery blasted dirt and soil all over them and literally buried them. And they're digging a trench, and they dig a trench, and they find bodies of Russian Wagner Group troops that have been just massacred, that were just left in the fields. It is just absolutely it was one of those things that you can't unsee once you see it. It was horrific to see, and it's not something I ever thought I would see in my lifetime. Not even third person perspective. Reading about it in history books, yeah, but to see it, it's happening right now as I'm talking. It doesn't. You can't. You can't really comprehend that. In Warsaw, Belarusians held a march dedicated to Freedom Day. Belarusians marked the country's Freedom Day and International Day of Solidarity with Belarus on March 25th by declaring continued resistance to authoritarian ruler Alexander Lukashenko. So this is a speed up of the march, which you can see there is quite a few people who are not interested in living under Lukashenko. If I had the book 40 asked, did their soft dance, did their special operations guys dance? You know, to be fair, if I saw videos of of my special operations forces dancing like theirs do, I would probably revolt too. Not gonna lie, I would definitely protest. All coming from Charter 97. And if you would like some more RFERL, just have some more. Unfortunately, police brutality continues to get worse against protesters inside of Paris and around France. A video of an example of brutal behavior regarding the French police towards protesters was circulated on the internet and throughout the networks. The inhabitants of France are outraged by the unmotivated ferocity of the security forces against this woman. And it is, it is pretty unwarranted when it comes to police actions. So this woman's walking down the street, right? And they come up behind her because there's protests and stuff going on. So she's in the area, but she's just kind of walking down this street, and these protesters came up behind her, or these security forces came up behind her. Then they immediately tackled her, sprayed her with with CS, with tear gas essentially, with pepper spray in the face, and you can see the cloud. And this person's probably like 3 or 4 floors up, and definitely quite a bit away from this, even though they're zoomed out. You can see the cloud just coming off of that, of all of the pepper spray that they just shoved in this woman's eyes. And somebody turns around to try and help this woman up out of the trash, and he gets her to her feet, which she's all stunned because she just got tackled and pepper sprayed pretty heavily by a armored up security forces guy. And a dude with a riot shield just trucks her over with the riot shield again. There is escalation, right? Like, there's escalations in the use of force. Now, this is something that you're trained in. This is something you're supposed to be trained in. I have yet to see a single police officer in the entire French, force this far that has been trained, in, use of force in de-escalation. Yes, riots suck. You know what you do when there's a riot? You put your shields together in a shield wall, because it's really hard to break a shield wall. Blows my mind. They're not just busting up into different small onesies and twosies and just beating the hell out of people with batons. First of all, that's wrong. You don't just beat. There's this thing. It's called escalation of force. Shout, show, shove, shoot. And that goes for a lot of different situations. Okay? And you can escalate quickly, and you can escalate slowly, and you can, hell, even occasionally, depending on if the situation's bad enough, even skip a step or two. Someone's shooting at you, you've escalated to the point of deadly force anyway. But when you're trying to deal with protesters, and you're just doing it with non-lethal, right? Shout, show the fact that you have intent, that you can, in fact, obviously show up with riot gear. That's a show, right? That's not, some, bicycle cop who just came down, down the street and is like, hey guys, you guys need to stop. No, show, right? Shove, shoving being like, corralling people with your shield wall that you should be doing, or arresting certain individuals that are getting especially out of hand. And then shoot would be, that's the point in which you do tear gas. Like if someone throws like a Molotov cocktail at you, you should probably arrest them. Like that's a deadly weapon. You know. And yeah, if the apprehension requires you to beat him with a baton, that's probably warranted at that point. This woman had absolutely no warrant. Like none of that was warranted. There are certainly protesters that get out of hand to do these things. But the average person is not there to do that. The average person is just pissed off at what you've done. Like I didn't even do this to protesters at the embassy. And they were throwing Molotov cocktails and rocks and shooting off fire. Dude, it was wild. And it was a hell of a lot more dangerous than this is. They literally set fire to 2 of the gate buildings. And tried to blow up our fuel depot. Like they threw Molotovs on the fuel depot. I had a Molotov land between like me and like the wall here. And go out, luckily. Like, yeah, it was a really... Sure. I had some people with some bean backgrounds, but like, come on, man. Like, they were actively getting on top of the wall and throwing rocks at me and being actually dangerous. Shout, show, shove, shoot. And I usually gave them the shout, show, and shove before I shot. And I see Fair says, I know someone who was on Maidan as a police recruit, really difficult mentally with no training, but chasing a woman down with a riot shield or with a shield is inexcusable. Where I think it's something important to emphasize here is, I've talked about my embassy experience before, and I understand that I have training to deal with some of the stresses, right? But here's the thing is I received, I had dealt with, combatants and stuff like that before, and it's much more simple. There's not it's the fine line you have to walk is a lot easier to walk. The tightrope's just a little bit wider. Because it's a lot more black and white, right? It's a lot more cut and dry. Someone shooting at you, shoot back. If you become engaged, you engage back. Hostile intent, hostile act or hostile intent plus positive identification equals deadly force is authorized. Pretty cut and dry with that. Protesters are not cut and dry. And before going to the embassy and doing it for real, I received absolutely no training in non-lethal techniques against protesters. Absolutely none. Absolutely none. I had never operated CS gas grenades. I had never used stinger grenades. I had never used foam or CS gas 40 mic grenades. I've never formally used or received any. I had a small, short, I fired 4 rounds out of it before. Familiarization fire with the shotgun, let alone using it with non-lethal ammunition on protesters. Flashbangs, never been trained with a flashbang before actually having to use them as crisis response. Never received formal training to do it. I learned on the job. On the job. No training. It's happening. And this is what we're going to have to do. So even then, if I, with no formal training in non-lethal and crowd control techniques, can do that and have the restraint, then I think this is inexcusable, especially if you've been a police officer in Paris. Because Paris isn't exactly known as being Paris is known for protests. Like, Paris is known for protests. Like, this is something that they should be very well trained in. Coming down here into Spain, thousands were evacuated due to major wildfires. 1,570 residents were evacuated on Friday as the major wildfire of the year ravaged through eastern Valencia region. 8 communities were evacuated. More than 500 firefighters were working to control the blaze. We have an update from Al-Hasaka, Syria. A pro-Iranian group claims responsibility for attack. So this is regarding the attack up there on Al-Hasaka on American coalition forces. Pro-Iranian group Lawa al-Gharibun did claim responsibility for the attack on Americans in Al-Hasaka, Syria, publishing both a statement and a video of a kamikaze drone being launched on a U.S. garrison. So, something important to note here. So the group Lawa al-Gharibun actually was, as of 2017, wasn't actually active anymore. So that was not actually an active organization. So they were supposedly deactivated. They reportedly stated that they had, they were reported to have actually disbanded as an organization, meaning that they have now been reformed specifically for these attacks. And if you can't tell by this moniker here, they are associated with Kataib Hezbollah. I'll actually pull up Kataib Hezbollah. And I'll pull up their insignia here as well. So this is the Kataib Hezbollah insignia. And then this is their insignia. Which, this is the insignia of pretty much most of the pro-Iranian groups. This one does have copyright music, so I apologize. So we're going to go ahead and mute that. But you can see there is our hostile Iranian force here. And you know what that looks a lot like? I don't know about you, but that looks a lot like a Shahed 131 or 136 drone. It's not exactly a Shahed 131 or 136, but it sure looks a lot like one. So, I'm not saying that it is for sure Iranians, right? But, that seems really, strange to me that they use the same symbols, regardless of the group, that if we know that they are backed by Iran, they all happen to use the same symbology. And it also is weird to me that they also seem to all use the exact same drone systems and rocket systems. And have the exact same methodology for engaging. And also have, oddly enough, for someone who's not supposedly an Iranian organization, a lot of pushback from the Iranian government when something happens to them. Like, say, ballistic missile strikes on many U.S. facilities across Iraq. Or attacks on a U.S. embassy compound as a result of drone and airstrikes. Weird. I'm not saying there's a coincidence. I'm just saying it's I'm just saying something's kind of smells funny about that. And they all seem to really like Muqtada al-Sadr a lot, who happens to also be the guy that tried to overthrow the U.S. or that tried to overthrow the Iraqi government not too long ago. But I digress. We jump down here and into Israel, where there are continued protests against judicial reform. About 600,000 people came out to protest against Netanyahu's government throughout Israel. Residents of the country are demanding not only the abolition of judicial reform, but also the resignation of Netanyahu, threatening to revolt. Representatives of the current regime responded to such attacks with their own threats. The head of the Ministry of National Security threatened to release far-right citizens supporting reforms on the streets of the city to disperse rallies. The head of the Ministry of Justice promises to resign if the reform is canceled. I see quite a large number of people are not very happy about judicial reform there in Israel. We continue on here. And in Kabul, the foreign ministry building entrance was bombed in the capital of Kabul, Afghanistan. It was carried about by a suicide bomber allegedly associated with the Islamic State, which was later confirmed. The bombing reportedly killed a ministry official, Azad Amiri, the ministry's internal correspondence director, Amanullah Salim, and according to the Taliban, the suicide bomber was stopped at the checkpoint and killed by security forces, but somehow managed to detonate a mine belt, killing 6 civilians and wounding 3 Taliban forces. See the destruction just outside the gate. And like I said, the Islamic State did claim responsibility for the terrorist attack. In a statement, it refers to 20 Taliban foreign ministry personnel, including diplomats who died and were injured when a gunman named Abdul Hamid Khorassani, who managed to overcome security measures and waited for the opportune moment to detonate the suicide belt. And that was accepted. That was published by the Islamic State. Up here in the northern parts of Afghanistan and parts of Pakistan, the death toll does continue to climb from the earthquake, and that death toll did rise to 16th by March 24th. In Afghanistan, at least 5 people were killed and 80 injured, and 653 houses were damaged. In Pakistan, there are at least 11 dead and 79 injured, as 172 houses were damaged. The United Nations Office for Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs has deployed assistance to the region. While the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province is getting hit with a double whammy here, unfortunately. Heavy rainfall is leading to casualties in the region. Severe weather-related incidents occurred following a heavy rainfall on March 25th. The Provincial Disaster Management Authority reported that 6 people have died, 17 have been injured, and about 10 houses partially or totally damaged. An interesting turn of events. China is opposing Russia and its plans to deploy nuclear weapons in Belarus. Despite seeming to have growing closer in their ties over the course of the war in Ukraine, the Chinese and the Russians aren't seeing eye to eye on everything. Quote, a nuclear war cannot be won or fought. Wars between nuclear weapon states should be avoided and strategic risks should be reduced. And from the Foreign Ministry spokesperson Mao Ning. While Japan, Japanese members of their parliament bought 20 cars for the Ukrainian military. In fact, the ambassador of Ukraine to Japan reported that a group of Japanese MPs created a fund of $1.2 million from their salaries and purchased 20 Toyota Hilux cars and some other products for Ukrainian armed forces. Yes, the Toyota Hilux. If you ever wanted a vehicle that you just said, or that you said, I want to have a vehicle that just will not die, it is the Toyota Hilux. The older, the better. Up to about the early 90s. But if you want a car that just will not die, the Toyota Hilux is it. You can get yourself a Toyota Hilux. That's it. Okay, I have seen things that should never be done to cars that have been done to Toyota Hiluxes, and they just keep going. They are the champions of the reliability realm when it comes to vehicles. They may be some of the most, simple, no good feature, no luxury feature trucks ever built. They may be some of the most plain trucks you will ever find in your life. But the Toyota Hilux just will not die. You will try to kill it, and it will not die. It's impossible. You just can't do it. I've seen them drowned in seawater, set on fire, blown up. I watched a 120 millimeter mortar round go through the engine block of a Toyota Hilux. And I guarantee you about the only reason it would have taken a mechanic with some basic tools, like what you would get in your average toolbox, and I guarantee you that engine probably would have been running, because the only reason it probably still wasn't driving is because the entire undercarriage part of the chassis was shredded. Okay? You just can't kill them. It's insane. Coming out of Kenya, damages following heavy rainfall have occurred. Kenya is affected by floods following heavy rainfall since March the 22nd. As of March 27th, one person has thus far died and one has been injured. Within 100 families have thus far been displaced. More heavy rainfall is forecasted over the next 24 hours. In relation, since we have been dealing with a lot of tropical cyclones coming through this area of Africa, unfortunately, coming out of Malawi, we do have updates regarding the tropical cyclone that came through. The death toll continues to rise. 511 fatalities thus far as of the 23rd of March, with 533 still missing. Approximately 564,000 people have been displaced across 577 accommodation centers throughout the southern region. Malawi has requested support from the EU Civil Protection Mechanism for shelter, health, wash supplies, non-food, as well as food items. While in Burkina Faso, a military convoy was attacked. A military convoy carrying supplies was attacked in Salmosi Morkoi Road in the province of Udalan. According to local sources, 6 people were killed and trucks were burned. No one has yet claimed responsibility for the attack. You can get some photos of some of the destruction here. Bolivia, overflow of rivers is causing casualties. Heavy rainfall of the past week has led to overflow of the Parai and Rio Grande rivers. At least 2 people have died and 7 have been rescued, and roads have so far been flooded. Coming from Mississippi in the United States, the tornado in Mississippi has been the deadliest in more than 50 years. A massive tornado that was nearly a mile long has killed at least 26 people and injured dozens more after devastating parts of western Mississippi on Friday, or the night of March 24th. The storm is the deadliest in over 50 years in Mississippi. Records from the National Weather Service suggest it hit several small towns with violent 166 to 200 mile per hour winds and gusts, and received a preliminary rating of EF4 on the enhanced Fujita scale. The White House declared a federal emergency on Sunday morning and unlocked funding for temporary housing, repair, and relief costs. Coming from the National Weather Service there. Rolling Fork and Silver City tornado has, of course, received that E4 rating, coming from the NWS National Weather Service in Jackson, Mississippi. And of course, there was a statement released by the White House. Jill and I are praying for those who have lost loved ones in the devastating tornadoes in Mississippi, and for those whose loved ones are missing. The images from across Mississippi are heartbreaking, and while we are still assessing the full extent of the damage, we know that many of our fellow Americans are not only grieving for family and friends, but they've lost their homes and businesses. Today, I reached out to the Mississippi Governor Tate Reeves and have spoken to Senator Wicker, Senator Hyde Smith, and Congressman Benny Thompson to express my condolences and offer full federal support as communities recover from the effects of the storm. I spoke with FEMA Director Deanne Criswell, who has already deployed emergency response personnel and resource support search and rescue teams to assess the damage and focus on federal support where it's needed the most quickly. To those impacted by the devastating storms and to the first responders and emergency personnel working to help their fellow Americans, we will do everything we can to help. We will be there as long as it takes, and we will work together to deliver the support you need to recover. To give you an idea, the system, or the enhanced Fujita scale, EF4 is the second largest and most devastating tornado a tornado can receive. F5s, or EF5 more properly, but F5s are the largest tornadoes that are possible, theoretically. Now, there have been questions on whether or not there should be F5 plus or F6s. That is a debate for meteorologists to work out. The important thing is, though, this really illustrates that it's getting into that season. Conditions are getting right. We're getting into that point where that winter cold weather is still, when you go outside and it's freezing cold at first thing in the morning when you go to work, especially here in Tornado Alley, and then by noon it's hot and you got to take off your sweatshirt and you just want to put on shorts and stuff. That is very much an indicator of, the type of weather that it's unstable. And that is what causes very severe thunderstorms and very tornadic weather. And so I think it's important, as every news organization does about this time of year, to remind everybody what the difference is between a tornado watch and a tornado warning. And my favorite expression in doing so is by referencing tacos. The difference between a tornado watch and a tornado warning. A watch is, I have all of the ingredients needed to make tacos. A warning is, we're having tacos right now. The tacos are made. You're having tacos. Don't want tacos? Don't matter. You're having tacos. And that is the difference between a tornado warning and a tornado watch. A tornado watch means the conditions are right to have a tornado. A tornado warning means there's a tornado on the ground, or that we have seen on radar. You need to take shelter because it's about to pick up your house. So that is the difference. So please remember, during these times, if you're seeing, if the clouds are getting kind of dark outside and you're kind of check the National Weather Service, check your local weather services, because there's people all over the world, but especially for those that live in the United States, check the National Weather Service and check, they have a live Doppler radar. If you click on the map, if you click on the radar, in fact, I'll pull it up here. I'll pull up the nice fancy National Weather Service radar. I watch this at work religiously, and I watch it here at home. But if you click on the National Weather Service radar, you can see all of these things pop up, and it will tell you if there's an alert here. They have a winter storm warning in this part of, around Agalala. I had to pick the weirdest one. Agalala, Nebraska. I'm so sorry if you live there. And you can see, obviously, here we can see severe thunderstorm warning. This is down here near Franklinton and Kentwood. Special weather statement. And you can pull up the details on this, too. Gusty, impact, gusty winds. Locations include Poplarville and Varnado. Flash flood warning. Once again, warnings versus watches. It goes without saying for all of them, not just those. Let's see. As we're looking at southern Mississippi here again. If you're in this region, just to let you know, severe thunderstorm near Wilmer. 60-mile-an-hour wind gusts and quarter-size hail. Hail damage to vehicles expected. Expect wind damage, roof sidings, and trees. For protection, move to interior room on the lowest floor of a building. Large hail and damaging winds continue to cloud to ground. Continues cloud to ground lightning within the storm. Move indoors immediately. So, once again, more severe weather in that area. And it is no joke at all. It is absolutely no joke when it comes to weather. So please, once again, be safe. And if you are in an extreme weather situation, the lowest, most interior room of your home that does not have a lot of windows. So if you have a basement, it is preferred to a basement. If you do not have a basement or a crawl space, it is preferred that you go into a central bathroom. And if need be, get into a tub. 10 out of 10 recommend bringing like pillows and blankets and stuff to pad yourself up and to be able to cover your head. Make sure you have some bottles of water. Recommend having some food. I keep a go bag. Personally, I keep a go bag that has all that stuff in it. Flashlight, that kind of stuff, and a radio is always good. So 10 out of 10, highly recommend. And a whistle. Because even if you can't yell, you can blow through a whistle. And that is extremely important when people are trying to find you. So, trips from Paul for severe weather. But keeping vigilant and just knowing what you're looking for. We come up here and into New York, where we have a couple of different things here. A couple of observances that have happened. So first one is the International Day of Solidarity with Detained and Missing Staff Members. The International Day of Solidarity with Detained and Missing Staff Members is marked each year on the anniversary of the abduction of Lech Collette, a former journalist who is working with the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees in the Near East, or UNRWA, when he was abducted by armed gunmen in 1985. His body was finally found in Lebanon's Bekaa Valley in 2009. The United Nations commemorated with hundreds of staff who lost their lives in service on this day. The first resolution on staff security was adopted by the UN Security Council in September of 1993. Negotiations during the Sixth Committee of the UN General Assembly on an international legal convention to protect UN personnel, which resulted in the Convention on the Safety of United Nations and Associated Personnel. It was adopted by the General Assembly on the 9th of December 1994. So yes, reportedly, I see someone's asking regarding Leopard tanks in Ukraine. Yes, reportedly there were 18 Leopard tanks provided to Ukraine, though I haven't seen confirmation. But Leopard 2 tanks have been rolling into Ukraine, and we have seen photos of them coming into Ukraine. But there hasn't been a lot of publicity to it. At this point, it was more or less the stuff that came out today. The International Day of Remembrance of Victims of Slavery and Transatlantic Slave Trade. The United Nations General Assembly established the outreach program on the transatlantic slave trade and slavery in Resolution 62-122, and it was designated March 25th as the annual International Day of Remembrance of the Victims of Slavery and the Transatlantic Slave Trade. Millions of African children, women, and men were trafficked across the Atlantic for over 400 continuous years, and the slave trade still has its impact on people of African descent across the world. The 2023 theme is Fighting Slavery's Legacy of Racism Through Transformative Education. CN Tower lit up dimmed their lights for 5 minutes each hour. And of course, we have the United Nations on this. And so that gets us into some of the interesting news that's happening throughout the world. And so jump over here where we have 5 planets which are lining up. 5 planets of the solar system, Mercury, Jupiter, Venus, Uranus, and Mars, will line up near the moon this coming week. The best time to observe that is reportedly on Tuesday. Look to the western horizon right after sunset. If you guys want some more information on that, you can check out AP News. We'll certainly be watching to see what's going on because we have the perfect view for it. And an interesting one, this one's coming from probably one of the coolest YouTubers out there, to be fair. He's an engineer. He has an engineering team. They do a lot of really cool designs. They've actually designed the world's first lightsaber, which blows my mind, but it's a thing. It is the world's first lightsaber. Then they decided to make something even newer. The team of engineers recreated John Wick's bulletproof suit in real life. After many tests with different fabrics for the suit, they settled on a variant of 20 layers of Kevlar, wool, and special kind of thin plastic. Combination of a vest and jacket can withstand the shooting of a .45 caliber cartridges from an MP5 submachine gun. If you guys know who this is Hacksmith, and they did some pretty amazing stuff. Now I'm not going to obviously show this video because I would like Hacksmith to get all the stuff on it and their views and all of their stuff. So if you want to go and check it out, it is listed there for you guys. But they build some really cool stuff. If you ever have a chance to go and check out their channel, they are incredibly intelligent and they have a lot of really cool things. Like I said, they built the world's first actually working lightsaber. I don't know what else to say. They've made John Wick's suit in a lightsaber, and Thor's hammer, and a lot of other things. They build some crazy stuff. It just blows my mind what they're capable of. But it's really cool to go and check out. So I highly recommend it. And of course, John Wick 4 is coming out here soon. So and Paul, it's spelled Uranus, not. Oh, he's trying to get me to go with Uranus, not Uranus. The pronunciation actually isn't really formalized. I have heard it said both ways professionally. So it's really up to what you prefer. But other than that, that is everything that has happened in the news over the last 72 hours. And I hope that you guys have learned a lot from this. I hope that you guys have been able to take a lot away from this. Obviously, a lot of stuff going on, a lot of people suffering. And I hope that you guys will be able to go forward with this information, hopefully donate to some wonderful organizations down there in the description. And hopefully we'll be able to make the world a much better place, given all of the different stuff that's happening. And so I appreciate you guys all coming and checking it out. I hope that everyone here is going to be safe. I hope that you, your family, and your friends are safe, of course. And if not, I do hope that you find that safety and security in the very near future. Don't forget to go and check out our own initiative that we just started. And you guys, the donation link and everything is already up there for you on our website. And we do have it listed in the description below. And I hope to be able to go forward with all of this wonderful stuff and hopefully get a lot of awesome things to happen there. Irva says, apologies, you talked about Germany tanks, right? Yes, Germany tanks I rolled that one into the other one with all of the different vehicles and tanks and everything coming in. But yes, so I hope that you guys will be able to go and check out that wonderful video description and check out our new initiative and help us support the efforts going forward with that as we move towards transitioning into a nonprofit with initiatives. And hopefully we'll be able to do a lot of good things for people there inside of Ukraine. But outside of that, I hope to see you back here on Wednesday at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, 9 p.m. Central. In the meantime, my name is Paul from the New News, and have a great one, everybody. Bye now.
Gone home, Russian soldiers, gone home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. Історія до волновахи, чудно кличе, діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТРО. Нам не треба ні конфлікту, ні війни. Та ми готові всіх вас звать до сатани. Тисячі вже полягло, і все більше шлепуємо. То для них нема нічого, крім труни. Gone home, Russian soldiers, gone home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. Історія до волновахи, чудно кличе, діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТРО. Вызволять пришел, братишка, ну привет. На моей земле тебе один ответ. Нашим людям с кирпичом, даже танки и бачок. Вам не взять нас и за 100 тысяч лет. Gone home, Russian soldiers, gone home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. Історія до волновахи, чудно кличе, діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТРО.
Mr. Putin, on behalf of all our guys, no one's scared of your nuclear device. You can take your top 11, shove it up your wrinkle bomb. Oh, we'll come and help you fit it in your skull.
Russian soldiers, gone home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. Історія до волновахи, чудно кличе, діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТРО. Gone home, Russian soldiers, gone home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. Історія до волновахи, чудно кличе, діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТРО. Russian soldiers, gone home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. Історія до волновахи, чудно кличе, діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТРО. Gone home, Russian soldiers, gone home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. Історія до волновахи, чудно кличе, діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТРО. Ідіть нахуй!